It's 4:02. I'm going to call the November 8th, 2021 workshop of the Roswell City Council to order. Ms. Call, please call the roll.
Councillor Kennard.
Present.
Councillor Lopez. Councillor Best.
Here.
Councillor Stubbs.
Here.
Councillor Foster.
Here.
Councillor Sanchez. Councillor Perry. Councillor Moore. Councillor Oropesa.
Here.
Councillor Roebuck. Mayor Kintai.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a quorum. Not that we need a quorum. This is a workshop. As such, we will not be doing an approval of the agenda. We will go directly into that. At this point, I will call on our city attorney, Mr. Patterson.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors.
A little louder.
See if I can get this a little closer. Test, good. Yeah, okay. Good evening, everybody, again. I'm just going to, before I turn it over to Mr. Adair, I'm going to review a couple of things which we talked about at the last special meeting. Just to remind you, we are in the process today of considering several proposals for redistricting. We are required under 1-3-13 of the New Mexico statutes to conduct redistricting in the same calendar year in which we receive the results of the census. The number of persons when we redistrict who are in each district must be as nearly equal in population as practicable within 5% of the mean of the population. And according to 1-3-13, districts shall not split precincts unless necessary to comply with federal law or to preserve communities of interest. The city did contract with New Mexico Demographic Research LLC in July to provide proposals for redistricting based on those census results. And we have been provided those. And I believe they've also been published on the website. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, good. So everybody's seen them. And the purpose of this workshop is to discuss the proposals, keeping in mind the requirements of 1-3-13, which we did review. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Adair, or Senator Adair, I should say.
One quick item, councilors. We are making no decisions tonight. There will be no votes taken. This is an opportunity, though, to gather information and to consider the options which will be voted on November 18th at the regular city council meeting.
Correct. As you'll remember, we did authorize to advertise for a public hearing for redistricting to do a new amendment to our ordinance. However, as you'll recall, the proposed ordinance as it stands today is just our same ward boundaries. However, it appears based on the census results that those will not stand under the requirements of 1-3-13. Hence, the need to revisit those, and whatever decision you adopt at the meeting where to consider adopting the ordinance will become the new ward boundaries.
Okay. Councilor Moore has a question for you.
No, can you go back to that previous slide? I was trying to write that number.
Okay.
I just needed it.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I guess what we'll do is just jump into the plans that you have all looked at, and we can just start off. Well, let me first say that a question has been raised with regard to what the redistricting plan looked like in 2011. That was handled by then city manager Mr. Fry, and Whether he took those records with him or not, I don't know, but I did not do the redistricting in 2011, and so what the district's statistics were at that moment in 2011, I don't know. But I have recreated from your own website, your own map of the current district, and I can tell you what the statistics are as we start out, and that's how we know that you were out of the allowable variance within the statute referred to by the city attorney. So Ward 1 was minus 4.93%. Ward 2 was plus 7.21. Ward 3 was plus 3.38. Ward 4 was plus 0.50. And Ward 5 was minus 6.64 as of the 2020 census, as it's currently constituted. So Wards 2 and 5 cause a need for redistricting. You had, as of the 2020 census, which was taken in April of last year, Ward 1 was 67% Hispanic, Ward 2 40%, Ward 3 51.7%, Ward 4 60.75%, and Ward 5 77.28%. And I can, if you want the figures for Anglo, Black, Indian, and Asian, I can provide those to you as well. As for what you have been sent, we can start off then with Plan A for redistricting 2021. And that's an overall map, and you can't see very much from this angle, but you can see, generally speaking, it follows the same pattern that you currently have, with Ward 5 being in the south, Ward 2 being in extreme north, Ward 3 essentially on the west side, and Ward 4 both central and south, and Ward 1 more or less in the center of the city and east side. And this is a close-up of Ward 1 in detail under Plan A. And Mr. Mayor and members of the council, if you have any questions as we go along, I guess we should just keep it informal. And
I agree. Councilors, if you'll activate your request to speak, we'll keep it, as we go along, we can do some questions for Mr. Adair. We will come to the public at the conclusion of this, so go ahead, Mr. Adair.
Plan A retains 3 wards that are 60% or higher Hispanic, with Ward 5 being 78.2, Ward 4 61.8, Ward 1 60.4, and Ward 3 is 53.6. Native American, Black population, and Asian population in Roswell is none of them exceeds 1.9% of the total population of.
We might want to silence our cell phones.
I'm sorry, apologize. Let me turn this off. The total, and this is non-Hispanic white, or the term of art in New Mexico for a century or more has been Anglo, is 35.1% for the entire city of Roswell.
Senator, Councilor Moore has a question. Councilor?
So these race numbers and all these things that you're throwing out, were we provided any of them can we get? That's what you're reading from this paper right here?
Probably.
Yeah.
And the non-Hispanic Native American is 0.7%, 0.7%. The Black population is 1.7%, and the Asian population is 1.1%. And the overall Hispanic population in the city is 58.8%. So the Plan A maintains 4 out of the 5 wards are majority Hispanic, and 3 of those are above 60%. If there are no questions on, I guess we can move around. I guess maybe you've already done that, Bobby. Move around.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody see close-ups, and you have those in your packets as well.
And they are online. Any questions on Plan A at this time? We can always come back, counselors. Okay. Why don't you go on to B?
Okay. Okay, go ahead and show Plan B overall. And while I'm at it, the ideal population is 9,684. If you had 5 districts with exactly that number in each of your districts, then everybody would have precisely the same level of representation. And that's the whole goal of the laws that came into effect beginning with Congress and state legislatures in the 1960s and being extended to local governments in the 1980s. And you can only go 5% on either side of that 9,684.
All right. I have Counselor Foster.
Ironically, that was the question I was going to ask. You said 5.4% on either side? So
5%, 5.0%.
5.0. So if we have one that's 4% lower and one that's 4% higher, that's acceptable? It's
Ye-
not?
yes.
Okay. Because that's what I was trying to find out, if the 5% was from the lowest to the highest mean, or it's actually from,
Yeah.
from the ideal. So
Now you're getting into a part of the statute that's slightly different. It's kind of hidden in the wording by the drafter of the bill last year. And with regard to state representative and state senator, they are allowing no more than a 10% variance. So if they were to come up with, let's say, 42 state senate districts, and the highest overage in any one of them was 3.1%, then they're arguing that you can be as low as 6.9%. But that's something that's going on in the state legislature right now, and it's mainly being pushed by the Navajo Nation because they have drawn their own maps. And so that, if you look at that part of the statutes, there is a different approach taken with regard to what the state house and state senate can have. It's the same in a certain sense, because 5% from the mean either way is 10%. But for the state house and state senate, the debate that's going to take place next month is going to push the idea that you can have a -3 to a 7, or something like that, as long as no district is farther from, as long as the biggest district is not farther than 10.0 points from the smallest district. Understand?
yes.
Our language is, I'll read it to you exactly. A local public body shall establish districts in which the number of persons in each district, as shown in the most recent federal decennial census, is as nearly equal in population as practical, but within 5% of the mean.
Of the mean.
So
Okay.
that same idea, you're talking about the 10, that refers to state house and state senate.
Well, and I was
You
trying
don't
to
have
make it smaller.
here. You don't have that kind of leeway.
Well,
then-
and I was thinking the 5% from the lowest to the highest, and not 5% from the mean. So I was trying to make it even more strict. So.
Right, yeah.
But okay, cool.
Just as an aside, for Congress, let's say there's 2.1 million people exactly in the state. That's not quite right, but if it were, each congressional district has to be 700,000 on the nose. Variance of 0.
Okay, back to you, Senator, on Plan B.
On Plan B, hopefully we've gone through it and shown the details there. And I would just say on Plan B, 4 out of the 5 districts are majority Hispanic. And wards 4 and 5 are 69.6 and 73.6 respectively, as opposed to 61.8 and 78.2 in Plan A.
All right. I don't have any questions on B at this point. We can go on to C.
Okay. Let's go ahead and look at Plan C. By the way, Plan A maintains all incumbents in their respective districts. Some of the other plans may move some incumbents around. With regard to the people serving terms, let's say elected in your last election, I guess, was in March of 2020 for 4-year terms. Nothing that is adopted has any effect on the 5 councilors who were elected to 4-year terms in 2020. Those councilors remain, they're elected to a term that is attached to the office. And you could turn the districts upside down if you wanted to, and that doesn't affect any councilor's ability to serve out that term. By way of example, let me give you an example from my own background. I was a senator. You keep calling me senator, but I'm not anymore. But I was elected to serve Chaves and Eddy County in 1996 and reelected in 2000. A year later, there was redistricting, and my District 33 was moved from Chaves and Eddy to Chaves and Lincoln. That had no effect on, I still remained the senator for Chaves and Eddy legally for the next 4 years, even though that was changed in 2001. You still serve out the term you're elected from for the full length of the term.
Senator,
Hope that makes sense.
let me interrupt. Let the record reflect that Councilor Perry joined us through GoToMeeting at 4:18 p.m. Sorry. Go ahead, Senator.
So, now, beginning with elections in 2022, and certainly for those whose terms end in 2024, whatever districts you adopt will apply for people running people who were elected in 2018 and whose terms end in 2022. And of course, going forward in the future, beginning in 2024.
Any questions on plan? Councilor Orpesa, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I understood the statement that you just made. That for individuals, their terms end in 2022, obviously it would apply.
Yes.
That if they move from one ward to the other one, then they have to run in the new ward. But I didn't understand the statement that you made about 2024.
All the councilors, 5 of them, in theory, every 2 years are elected from one from each ward. All of those elected in March of 2020 serve a term from the districts from which they were elected through March of 2024. So this redistricting cannot have any effect on their current term of service, because that's already established by the voters and in your charter and state law and everything. In other words, you can't redistrict somebody out of, you can't say, oh, this guy was elected from District 3 in 2020, and now we changed District 3, and he or she no longer lives in it, so it can't be a counselor. That's not true. You're legally bound to the term that you were elected to that was placed in the proclamation from the Secretary of State.
So
Does
we
that
need
make
to
sense?
go and look at our policies, because I believe there's a policy in our city code that addresses that if you move out and it doesn't explain whether you move out or you're out of your district.
Mr. Patterson, why don't you address that?
Yeah, so I know what you're referring to, and actually the municipal code state law has a similar provision about residency. The deputy city attorney and I were actually looking at this today, and our conclusion was the same as Senator Adair. If you're elected to a term, then you serve out that term, and redistricting cannot eject you from your seat.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Senator, go ahead.
So are we on?
I have Councilor Foster. Councilor?
The only thing that I recognize that would be different would be if it changes and say, I'm no longer in Ward 5, but I'm still serving till 2024, but yet then I move. I change my residence.
Right, you have to
Even if I
maintain,
stay.
you have to maintain residency within the boundaries of the ward as it existed when you were elected. Right.
Any more
Any more
discussion
questions
on
on
Plan C?
C? Okay. Want to go on to Plan D?
Plan D, go ahead. I guess everybody's picked up on the fact that Roswell has 29.79 square miles within its boundaries, and, you know, the size of your districts and all of that. So District 5 is, Ward 5 is always going to be the largest because it encompasses, at this time, encompasses the RIAC, and so it takes up quite a bit of space out there. So Plan D has 3 of the 5 wards being majority Hispanic. And again, there are no significant, and what I mean this demographically and with regard to redistricting only, no significant other minority groups that may or may not be addressed or affected by the Voting Rights Act or anything else. So I'm in the city of Roswell, I only address the Hispanic population.
I have Counselor Moore. Counselor, you have the floor.
I just have a question. Since we're in Warren Park, a lot of mine involves the county. Is the population, the numbers, are the county numbers taken out of the numbers that we're seeing? You know, because like in the middle of 5, that gap is county. Right in the middle of my ward, right? Where Coca-Cola and all them, that's all county. So all those numbers, those people's numbers and those percentages are not included in these numbers, correct?
No, the only numbers that are included are those that are within the political boundaries of the city of Roswell.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have Counselor Oropesa. Counselor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along those same lines, do you have that information specific to precincts? How many, what is the population, let's say for instance, precinct 52, which is mine? How many reside in the city and how many reside in the county?
In precinct 52, 911 reside in the city.
No. What I'm asking is, in 2011, we got this chart that talks about every precinct, the total population and breakdown by ethnicity and what have you. Do you have something like this to give us so we can look at the numbers themselves?
Yes, we can provide a precinct by precinct listing of the population of each precinct and the ethnicity of each precinct. We can provide that.
Because it was my understanding, at least at the October 26th meeting, that we would have those numbers by today. Is that not true, Mr. Mayor?
I know we were to provide data for by today. I don't know what the level of accuracy. When could we get those, Senator?
Oh, by the end of the week, we have to go to Artesia and San Juan County and Gallup this week, but we can get by precinct figures for the population as well as the ethnic breakdown for each precinct.
Okay.
And I think they're so important to be able to compare, at least for my sake. I don't know about the rest of them, but at least for my sake, I want to double check the numbers, because I recreated the 2011 with the numbers from theirs, which is not very different from today's numbers, according to the census. We only acquired 56 individuals, according to the census for 2020. So. And what I see is a lot of movement within the community, and I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, because it very well could, but I want to see what that movement is, where the growth is, and why are we taking so drastic measures to make rearrangements of each ward. And that's the reason that I want to have those numbers, but I don't care if those numbers are the ones that overlap with the county, as long as we have the numbers specific to each precinct as they are supposed to be counted in the city. Would we be able to get that number, and I'm hearing you say by Friday?
I would think we would be able to get you a list of each precinct, its population and the ethnic breakdown.
But you're only going ethnic as far as Hispanic. Is that correct?
No, we could provide Asian, non-Hispanic Indian, and non-Hispanic white, the term used by the Census Bureau.
That would be great for me because that way we can compare it to the 2011 numbers that we do have. We do have the numbers for 2011, but it's county, not specific to city.
I saw that list, and yes, you probably have at least, I want to say 8 or 9 of those precincts that you can't count that number in it because
There's 6.
you've already split them, the city of Roswell split them many years ago. Plus, the one difficulty with city and school district redistricting that's not present with the legislative or the county commission is that precincts do not fall on the city boundaries. The precinct boundaries, more than half of them do not end where the city political boundaries end.
Actually, there's only 14 that don't. And there's 6 of them that were not included in the 2011 or 2020. For instance, precinct 8, 17, 18, 20, 64, and 95 were not included in the 2011 or 2010.
That's right, under those numbers. They were
Right.
included in the number of the precinct from which they were split. Those precincts are merely splits from previous precincts.
Right. And then you have 14 precincts that overlap into the county.
Yes, that's what I was trying to just now explain, that the political boundaries of the city, believe me, I'm sure that research and polling and everybody else who does this wishes that every single city would go ahead and annex out to the boundaries of the precincts, and so that everything would be beautiful. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, and so we have to get into census blocks.
So you're telling us that we will have that information by Friday?
Yes, I think that we can provide it by Friday, yes.
So that implies, Mr. Mayor, that we're going to have another special meeting?
If you wish to have one.
I
will just say
yes.
that the acquisition of this information will not change it will not change the manner in which you do this or anything else. It's just going to be information by precinct, like you mentioned precinct 52, which has 911 people within the city limits, and it has about, I'm going to say, another 600 or so that are in the county. And you can find out that roughly 65% of precinct 52, if I remember, is Hispanic, and about 30% is Anglo, and the other 5% divided up among other ethnicities. How that helps you, I don't know, but we can provide it, and the populations of each individual precinct.
Well, I'm having a hard time understanding, because the maps that are drawn are so very different from the current status quo maps that we have. And I'm having a hard time understanding why 56 people, the growth of Roswell in 10 years, why that would have such an impact of such movement. If we can see the numbers, for instance, and say 52 from last 2010, according to the number that I have here, they had 1,513 countywide. And you're saying that roughly about 900 of those are in the city.
Yes.
Okay. So if I saw that district or precinct 52, their population dropped by 50%, then I want to see where the other 50% went to. Did they go to Ward 3? Did they go to Ward 4? Did they go? where is it that they went?
Well, you won't be able to determine that. No, and number one, no precinct in the entire county dropped by 50%. There are very minor growth and loss. The difference in Roswell and the reason you have to redistrict is that collectively, what's known now as Ward 2 grew at a much more rapid rate than the rest of the city, and Ward 3 grew somewhat. Ward 4 stayed the same. Ward 5 lost a number of, perhaps 700, 800 people, and Ward 1 lost quite a number of people as well. But so that's the way it happens. It's not like 56 people changed, and that's the whole story of Roswell. It's where the growth was and where the loss of population was.
See, but citywide, there was no growth, to be honest. 56 people, you cannot say really is growth. It's only 56 people. But and going back and trying to reconstruct the 2010 information comes out to the same thing as the 2020 if you plug in the same numbers. I mean the numbers from 2010. Because back in 2010, the final census count was 48,366. And if you take the total population of all the 5 wards and add them together, it comes out to 54,592. And when you subtract the 48,366 per ward, you come out with 6,226, which I'm thinking are the county people. So if you divide that by 5, you come out with an average of 1,245.2. And when you subtract the average for every ward, you come out in 2010, at least, and I know these aren't perfect numbers or accurate because I didn't have all the specific numbers per precinct, but you come out with 9,361 population in Ward 1, 11,790 in Ward 2, 8,798 in Ward 3, 9,045 in Ward 4, and 9,372 in Ward 5. So Ward 2 back in 2010 was already loaded. And so if I use the same information from 2010, again, and I'm saying I'm using information 2010 because the population hasn't changed, and I went through the same process. I came out with Ward 1 having 9,373. And again, having the same formula, total population by 5 wards is 54,592. The 2020 census count is 48,422. And if you subtract that, it's 6,170, which I would say would be the county. And you divide the 6,170 by 1,234, 5, you come up with 1,334 even across for each ward. And you subtract that from the total of each ward, and I came out with 9,373 for Ward 1, 11,801 for Ward 2, 8,809 for Ward 3, 9,056 for Ward 4, and 9,383 for Ward 5. And so those numbers are pretty close to the target, what you call the target, 9,684. And so again, I don't see the drastic change in wards. There might have to be some adjustments to bring us to that close to the 96,000 or 9,600 that you're talking about.
You can get the kinds of figures you're discussing if you add the total population of each precinct that is touched by the city of Roswell. And that's what you've done. The problem is that there are at least a half a dozen or more, maybe 8 or 9 precincts that are not like that. For instance, you have Precinct 10 is usually in Ward 2, but only 50 people in that precinct live in Ward 2. The other 1,500 or however many live in the county. Precinct 11, where I live, has maybe 400 and something people in the city. But the people who live in the pecan orchard or other places out in Precinct 11, you can't count those. You're counting all of those figures and coming up with 50-something thousand people. By doing that, you reach the goal that Roswell's wanted for 30 years, which is well over 50,000.
You misunderstood me.
Okay.
You misunderstood me because what I said was the total number of all the precincts. And let me show you what I did. This is a table. And I took, for 2020, I took all the precincts that were approved for each ward back in 2011. Okay? And understanding that back then certain precincts didn't exist. And I understand that they have been divided into and so forth, and there's allowances for it. And also, there's like you said, there's precincts that overlap into other precincts as well. And let me give you an example. You got Precinct 13. The majority of that precinct resides in Ward 3. But when you look at the map, you got precinct or a sub-precinct designated as 13.002. And that's East College between Montana and Union. And the reason that little prong is there was because the last demographer made it a point to make sure that every incumbent was kept in their district, and that was Dusty Huckabee's district. So you've got an overlap from District 13 overlapping into District 1. And so without having the true numbers, what I did was estimated what portion of that little space from 13 was being counted in District 1. And so I just, by looking at the map, said maybe 5% will be the total that can be counted in Ward 1. So I counted 65 out of 1301 for that particular, for Ward 1. And the same thing happened with Precinct 41. You have 14.002 as being in Ward 1. And Precinct 41 is a real large precinct. And so again, I just took an estimation about maybe 5%, and that's the number that I counted in Ward 1.
How many was that?
And for 41? For 41, it's 110 out of 2,191.
And how many in Ward 2?
In Ward 2, I counted the rest of it, 2,081.
And see, there's the problem, because the answer is there's 125 in Ward 1 under for 41 and 1,102. And the other part, nearly 1,000 people, are in the county.
Yeah, but there's allowance.
So that's how you get the earlier number you mentioned, 53,000 and something. That's how you get 5,000 more than actually reside in the city.
Okay, but let me try and re-explain it to you. Again, taking the total populations of every single ward, I come up with 54,592. The target amount, according to you, is 48,422.
Yes.
So you have 6,170 that can be considered in the county, be county residents.
Yeah, they're not can be, they are in the
Well,
county.
okay,
Yeah.
for the sake of argument, they are.
Yes.
Okay, so if you divide the 6,170 by 5, which would give you an equal amount for each ward, that amount is deducted from the total amount of each ward. For instance, in Ward 1, I had 10,607 with all the population. Once I took off the average of 6,170, which would be 1,234, I come up with 9,373 that actually, for all intent and purposes, are counted in the city.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor, would you like for me to give you the current populations, not a plan A, B, C, or D, or E, but the current population of each ward?
I would like the information for each ward, by precinct, broken down by ethnicity, like the 2011 census had it.
I will say that that is not in the contract, but I can provide it. As I spoke with you, as I said earlier, we can probably get that information to you by Friday. It's not something that's in this contract or any of the other contracts, but I can get that information for you. At this time, I can tell you that Ward 1 has 9,207 people. Ward 2 has 10,382. Ward 3 has 10,060. Ward 4 has 9,732. And Ward 4 has 9,041. Ward 1 is minus 477 below the ideal. Ward 2 is plus 698 above the ideal, and therefore 7.21%. Ward 3 is 376 above the ideal. Ward 4 is only 48 above the ideal, and Ward 5 is minus 643 below the ideal, and therefore 6.64% below the ideal district. Those are the current populations. You want to get additional information, we can get it to you.
You're still going to send us that information, right? Instead of
I
just
will.
giving it to us right here.
That's right. It'll probably take a few hours, but yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have Counselor Best. Counselor Best, you have the floor.
So, at this time, I'm not confused. Well, I kind of am confused. Were you telling me that Mr. Fry, the city manager, did this in 2011?
I don't know. I don't know if he did or not.
Okay. And usually in your contracts, you're speaking of a contract, what do you provide? Because we don't know exactly what's in that contract because that's under the $60,000 for Joe. Actually, I believe ours is $26,000 for you. Am I correct?
I don't remember. I have a bunch of contracts. I don't remember how much it was.
Well, the county's 36, and we are 26, from what I understand, give or take a couple hundred or whatever. The way we received our information was piss poor. For that amount of money, you should have a program that can get our maps to us where we don't have to manipulate them, a Victor, something like that. Because we had, and the county, all had to manipulate the maps so we could get clear enough views that we could understand. So I'm pretty disappointed in that. I feel that we needed the correct numbers, like Juan, sorry Juan, I'm agreeing with you,
It's all right.
that
No problem.
we do need those numbers. I heard in a roundabout way that you usually provide 2 maps. So I'm kind of wondering why we have 5 and we got E at the 11th hour. And that kind of bothers me. I think we need the numbers at least a day or 2 before we come back to a workshop. I think we should have another workshop the 16th or 17th. I think we need to be down on the floor on tables where we can all converse and talk. I don't see any reason why we have B through E, because as Juan says, all we need to do is shuffle some of the, I'm going to call them colors because that's what you've given me as colors, because I'm not a numbers person. Give me sheep, I can count sheep. People, they don't stay in the same place very long. So we probably only need 1 map. The closest map is what we have now. Shuffle a few down, around, and over, I think would be appropriate instead of playing with our minds. And you look at all these maps that we've got, ones that you can't read, and then we put them up here, you can't read them, and we expect our citizens to come and participate in this and help us. I don't know how long you've been in business with New Mexico Demographics. I assume it's an LLC. Are there certifications for demographicologists? I assume that's what you are. Are there?
No.
Okay, so this is just maybe because you're an engineer? I don't know.
No.
Okay, so how many years have you been doing this?
25?
Okay, and there's no certification for it. How many maps did the county get?
3? 3.
Okay, and do they also have to be turned in by the end of November 30th to the state?
No. The county's is due by the 31st of December. Legally, yours is due by the 31st of December. I made the argument with others in this business and with the Secretary of State's office that you should really finish before Thanksgiving so that you're, and Mr. Sanderoff of Research and Polling agreed with me, as did the author of the legislation, Senator Ivy.
But didn't I hear you tell me that in legislation they're going to change the rules again? So why are we doing this before they change the rules?
No, I didn't say.
Did I hear wrong, Judy? Because I heard that it's going to go to legislation, and this legislature is going to do this, and this, and then it's going to come back down to this. I think I heard that. I'm not sure. I maybe didn't clean my ears this morning. But, okay, so now we've got till the 31st from what the state says.
Legally, you have until the 31st, but that's not a good idea, and it's not good public policy, because the Secretary of State is going to issue a proclamation for your city's election on the 1st of December. And so, to be fair to anybody wanting to run, the argument I made is that we should really finish this up a few days before the 1st of December, so that people can have a better chance of knowing whether they live in the districts.
Okay, I'll give you that, but I'm kind of a counselor that works for the whole city. You've got a person in each ward coming up to be voted out. Okay, so each ward has a chance at one position. I work for all of the city. They may vote me in on Ward 3, Thank goodness they do. Or maybe next time they'll find someone to run against me. I don't care. But we work for the whole city. I agree a little bit on one, that this is being maneuvered around for political purposes. And this shouldn't be done. Because we do have more growth in 2, like you said, a little bit more in 3. That makes sense. All your new housing is up there. We can't talk about the new housing on Sycamore, even though there's a plan, think the second phase going up. You can't count those people for another 10 years. So we can't do that. So there's no reason why 2, 3, you lost some in 1, so why can't you move those over from 2? Okay, you lost a few in 3, and then you've got the same in 4, so you can maneuver those around instead of doing such a drastic color improvement to the city of Roswell. So I'm just really disappointed on how you presented it to us, because I'm simple-minded. I don't know who else is simple-minded, but I'm simple-minded and had a hard time with the JPEG maps, which should have been Victor's for full color. I understand that because I did have a print shop. They could have even been done sharper to where it would have been much better. And considering your contract is close to $26,000, a little over, a little under, whatever, you could afford doing that. I also feel with that amount of money, you could have afforded to produce the paperwork for us. Like we have all of our handouts instead of our city doing it, because that probably put the city out a little bit. But that's your business. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to, well, I might tell you how to do your business. Anyway, I think I'm done. I'm just so frustrated in this. I would really like a workshop, either the 16th or 17th, down on the floor, all of the numbers that you say you can get us. I'd like those 2 or 3 days ahead. So you said Friday, that would be good. I have them all weekend to go over them, and Monday to go over them, since we're shooting for the 18th. I understand you feel that the other elected officials need a chance to bite from the other wards. We haven't had a good turnout on people that want to run, so I don't know what to say about that, but I'll stop for now. Thank you.
I have Counselor Stubbs, Oropesa, and Moore. Counselor Stubbs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple things before we go any further, and that is, I realize I'm the only person in the room, and probably even still alive, I don't know, that I'm over here. I've been banned, I'll tell you later. But anyway, I was involved in both the 2000 and the 2010 redistricting. I was on the council both of those times, and we did have someone, we did employ someone, and for the life of me I can't find any of the records, but we did employ a demographer to do the 2010, and I remember him very well sitting at that table, and the amount of hours we went through in trying to just move a few streets here, a few streets there, and we'd go into the computer he did, and we'd move everything, and we'd get new numbers, and it was really, Frank, you were there. I know you were there. And so anyway, we did hire someone to do that, and that's just a little bit of historical information. But I think to go along with a lot of what Councilor Best was saying, I think the thing that I'm very concerned about when I look at these maps and look at the current one is the one thing that's probably most important to me, and that is preserving communities of interest. And I believe that's in statute to try to do that. And when I look at these maps and I see how they're now stretched around as opposed to preserving that intent of keeping communities together and represented by someone who lives within the community, it really bothers me. I'm trying to think. I think, Senator, that the one you have up is the one I'm thinking about. When I look at Ward 3, it goes like from West Tilden all the way up to Berendo. And that just doesn't, is that one? It's up. Yes. It just seems to me to try to consolidate them as opposed to stretch them out would preserve that intent of communities of interest more than what I'm seeing here. So I just want to say I agree with what I've heard, and that is if we could get those precinct numbers, they may be able to help us determine that. And I think, too, what we've done in the past, at least as I recall, is that we've taken the current wards and kind of added and subtracted from them instead of moving them all around. So I would also support another workshop where we had a chance to look at those numbers. Thank you.
I have Councilor Orpesa, Moore, and Foster. Councilor Orpesa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a copy of the agreement. But before I ask the question, let me ask our legal counsel, when did we know that the deadline was November the 30th, or
As Senator Adair said, there's not a, quote, deadline of November 30th. The statute says we can finish or must finish redistricting by the end of the calendar year in which the federal census results are provided. However, because of the Secretary of State's timeline, the Secretary of State's not going to be able to get their proclamation out before we redistrict if we wait all the way till the end of the year. So that's where the deadline is more just we need to get our information to the Secretary of State, but there's no law that says that.
okay, because the contract itself states it gives a deadline or a timeline. It says on section 2B, it says based on communication from the Census Bureau, both NMDR and the city currently anticipate that the required census data will not be provided by the Bureau of Census until on or about 1 October 2021. That being the case, the following timeline is anticipated. Point number 1 is receive Census Bureau demographic data October 1st, 2021. Develop plans for 5 districts October 1 to October 21. Present 4 plans to the city council committee or task force October 22, 2021. And so my question is, did we have a city council committee or task force? Did you work with a task force, Mr. Adair?
No, I did not. And on that note, I sent a letter to, I think, every single client that there was an additional issue, and that was the splitting of precincts and adjustment of precincts that's going on throughout the state. And there were 3 counties in particular. Chaves County is an exception, but because they did theirs very, very well, probably the best in the state. But we did not get the final data from the Secretary of State's office, or as provided by Research and Polling, and integrated in with the Census Bureau data through Maptitude until Friday. I think it was a Friday, the 16th of October. So there were 3 counties in particular, Bernalillo, McKinley, and San Juan, that were very, very late in getting those in. So we didn't even get the data until the 16th of October.
Did you share that information with the clerk?
I think I did I think I sent a letter to that effect to Mr. Nebb and to Sharon Call.
But are you talking data, the one that you have presented to us, as far as
No, I'm
numbers
talking
and-
about what has to go into the program,
Okay. Well, let me continue with the time
the
frame.
program that we work from.
The timeline says, work with / respond to questions / requests for adjustment by the committee or task force, which you said there was none, October 23rd to November the 10th. Finalize remaining 2 options per guidance from committee or task force from November the 11th to November the 19th. Present either the final option or 2 finalist options to be determined by the designated city officials together with all required demographic data to the city manager or designated official for final review from October the 20th to the 23rd, 2021. Present final plan to city manager November the 24th or earlier, and adopt a plan by city council December the 9th. And the reason that I asked the question about the deadline is because both the city and Mr. Adair signed the contract saying that we have till December the 9th to finish this process. And so I can understand Mr. Adair not having all the information on a timely basis, but nevertheless, we're pushing to make sure we vote on this on November the 18th. And according to the contract, this says by December the 9th. So is the contract wrong?
I don't think it's wrong, Mr. Oropesa. I think the wording says is anticipated. It's not, you got to remember, we have 106 cities which should communicate. Not all of them have to, only those above 10,000 have to have districts, but I communicated with a lot of cities and counties, and I used similar language because, for instance, we just came from Las Vegas this week, and they do have a committee appointed by the city council called a redistricting committee. Some municipalities have that, and I provide for that in the proposals that I send that are later turned into contracts, explaining that we will work with redistricting committees or subcommittees of the city council if you have them. And also, I think you said the wording says is anticipated,
Right.
and it's not chiseled in stone. If you want to go till December 9th, I think that that would be okay. But what's not okay is to go all the way to the legal allowance, which is December 31st, submit it to the Secretary of State, and then have filing date for the offices 4 days later with holidays in between. I think that's unfair to voters. That's just a personal opinion of mine. So I've urged cities that I'm working for to get this done on or about the date of the Secretary of State's proclamation. If you don't want to do that, look, legally, you're responsible for your own redistricting. You can choose any one of 5 options you have. You're dissatisfied with those. You can have Plan F and Plan G and Plan H and Plan I, or whatever you want to do. You're responsible. It's up to you.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because one of the questions that I have here to ask, are we mandated to redistrict? And I know that the slide indicated that we had to conduct a redistricting process, but does that mean that we have to maneuver and rearrange the wards?
You have to do such changes as are necessary to bring all 5 wards within 5% of the ideal.
Mr. Patterson, why don't you answer that?
Yeah, that is correct. Within the calendar year, we have to redistrict, meaning that if there's any boundary lines which don't meet the requirements of the statute, which are 5% of the mean, and no precinct splits, which we've got several of those right now that need to be addressed, unless it's to comply with federal law or to preserve a community of interest. So it's not just about the population levels. One of the things that our demographer has done is created boundary lines that fit the precincts, which is another requirement of law. And so by the end of the calendar year, our precincts have to do that.
Because what I was going to recommend would be to use the same status quo map that we have and try to work with that one as much as possible and to confirm to those requirements.
Well, Counselor, the challenge that we have is something that was kind of referenced, is that you can't just go, well, we need to expand it, a block this way or take it back a block that way. We can't do that. We have to follow the precinct lines. And so that's where the demographer is able to use the existing boundaries that we have to use in order to create those boundaries and wards that actually fit the population data. We're not able to just jigger the system so that it goes, shoots out like it does now. That's not allowed under the statute.
Good. Okay, so, let me ask you another question. Did you, the information that you were getting constantly from, and I'm assuming that you were, from the Census Bureau, were you sharing that with city staff? With all the numbers and every information that you were getting concerning redistricting, were you sharing it with Sharon?
I provided email updates, a couple of them, about where we were.
Okay.
Those emails are public record. You should be able to, any email that I've had with Ms. Call or Mr. Nebb should be available to everybody in the public.
But we don't have the numbers to use them tonight.
Oh, I don't know what you're asking, sir. I don't have any additional numbers from the Census Bureau that I've provided to them or to someone else that I haven't provided to you.
So, Mr. Nebb, do we have those numbers from the census that were provided?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, within the emails, all the numbers are with each one of the plans. So the numbers and the breakdowns for each one of the plans were included with all the different types of maps and the insets and all of that. So those are the numbers that we have access to.
But again, we don't have the specifics to the precincts. The numbers to the precincts haven't been provided to us before tonight.
It's my understanding that is correct. That was the conversation we had earlier.
Right.
Correct.
Which you represent Ward 1, Mr. Oropesa? I can tell you right now that, for instance, on Plan A for Ward 1, you have precincts 14, 15, 25, 41, 43, part of precinct 5, 51, 6, 42, and 52. And you only have 12 people out of precinct 5 in that plan. I can give you the populations of each one of those precincts if you like. But I can get this to you. I'm here to tell you it's not going to enhance any part of the redistricting process. But if you want it broken down, if you want the census block numbers down to 2 people or 3 people or whatever, I can do that. That's going to take about 20 hours or so.
Okay.
It's not in the contract either. But if you want that sort of stuff, I can do it.
It's interesting that you keep referring to the contract.
It's because I have...
I got the contract right here.
I have 5 cities and 10 counties that I'm responding to, and I have to meet deadlines because of the unprecedented delays. For the first time in history, the Census Bureau did not release its data in April of the year following the census. It didn't release it until partially released it in August, and then all of it released in September. And then we didn't get the precinct splits and the final New Mexico integration into the Census Bureau and into the electronic programs that we use from Aptitude until October 16th. So everybody who's doing this is under time constraints. And that's just the way it is.
Well, and because you keep referring to the contract, let me read section from section 2C. It says NMDR will be available for all meetings requested or required by the designated committee or task force to provide all information and respond to all questions presented, whether conducted by the committee task force alone or in public forum, should the committee task force desire to hold public hearings for the purpose. And we had a meeting scheduled October the 26th that had the redistricting information as part of the agenda, but we had to scratch it out because you weren't able to be there. So my point is, if you want to follow the contract by the wording, then maybe we should follow the contract. Don't you agree?
I am following the every contract that I have. I'm following.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, Mr. Adair, there was an email that we received from Sharon that she forwarded to us from you. And when I read the content of your email to Sharon, it stated, and I quote, "Per request, the attached is submitted as Plan E. Demographic data will follow," in the quote. And so I emailed Sharon and asked who that individual was that requested that information. And she said she didn't know. So can you tell us who requested that information for Proposal E?
Yes.
I did. I
I'm sorry?
requested option E.
Um,
I requested option E.
Okay. Okay, because my next question was going to be, was the information that you have provided to us so far, was it independently researched and obtained by your company? Or were you at any time asked or given suggestions or directions by the mayor, a counselor, or any staff in creating the 5 proposals?
I suggested E, Counselor. I asked for him to do that. I also asked for D.
Well, that kind of clears up why the maps look the way they are, Mr. Mayor.
Okay? You've got 5 options, Counselor.
Actually, we can have 6.
You could have 6. You could have more,
We can have 6 if we decide to keep the status quo.
which apparently fails to meet the state statute, according to our city attorney.
But if the other 5 do not pass,
That's an excellent question. I don't know what happens then. If we do not pass one that complies with state statute, we don't know what's going to happen. Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, there is not any explanation about what happens if we fail to meet the law. However, I must strongly advise that we do not violate the law.
So my suggestion here is, this is the data. This is the information. You've got 5 options. If you want to amend one or change one, pick it. Pick whatever you want. I believe option A, if I'm not mistaken, is the closest to the existing ward boundaries. If that's acceptable, then you vote on that. If that's not acceptable and you want to make changes that comply with the law, you can do that.
Mr. Mayor, do I still have the floor or not?
You do. You asked
Okay.
a question and I responded.
Okay. So the thing is, I think I would want to wait to get all the numbers, specific numbers for each precinct, and then try to see if we can work it to where we don't have to go through all 5 maps and perhaps come up with one pretty close to what we have right now, and staying with the requirements that are issued by the state and federal government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I have Councilor Foster next. Exhaust my list. Councilor Foster.
Wow, I thought there was other names between me and that. Sorry. So I wasn't quite ready. But one of the questions I have, and I don't know if we're able to do this, can we put up the current city map or ward district? Do we have that? I mean, I know it's on the website.
Well, we should have all those because all the documents that Senator Adair has sent me, I have on a flash drive that Bobby has.
Okay, so if you could load it up and show it to us, because I was part of the redistricting in 2010, and I know the changes we have there, and compared to what we have now, there were some major changes. And when we start talking about communities of interest and such like that, there was so many changes to it that what we have now fails. Because as I remember, Councilor Oropesa actually was Ward 5. The base was not Ward 5, it was Ward 4. We didn't have these fingers of 4 and 1 intertwining to make certain numbers fit. When you look at the current one compared to all 5 of the ones we've gotten, they're way more clear-cut, set up for communities of interest. They're not intertwined, so somebody from one side of the street is on one ward and someone from the other. Well, I'm not saying they don't, because it might. But the 5 choices we have compared to what we voted on and passed in 2010 are still better than what we have. And so saying that that we can't change is not true, because the change from 2010 to what we have now is drastic, because Councilor Moore would have been in Ward 4 if we stayed with the 2010 model that or prior to 2000, the two that was come up in 2000. So we can change, and that is what I'm trying to say, is that we were given a lot more choices this time than we were last time, and there's not as many drastic changes. Now, the other statement being said that we haven't gotten numbers, we've got all the numbers from each plan of how the makeup, the demographic makeups from each plan are. And so we have got the numbers. No, we don't have it by precinct, but unless we're trying to each individual counselor, or why we need it by precinct, so that we can change it and tweak it and come up with different plans that might meet that's the problem I have. Is yes, I'd like to have that information, but when we get to that point, is it because now we're going to have 20 things to choose from, 20 different plans? And unless I'm wrong on our bylaws and what state constitution or state laws, there's no way that we can weed this down to 1 or 2 plans by our November meeting, because we would actually have to vote on it. And if we have to vote on it, we actually have to have a special meeting that is actually a meeting and not a workshop, because we're not making any decisions here. And if we have another workshop, we can't make any decisions there. So unless we're going to call a special city council meeting so that we can actually vote on this and narrow it down so that by November 18th we could have it. And I understand the contract said, and I know legally we don't have to have it till December 31st. But if we stayed with it, then we would have people, as Senator Adair said, having to sign up January 6th and not knowing really what ward they're going to be, or is it January 6th signing? January 4th. Yeah, January 4th, and not knowing what day or what ward they actually can run from. This is our current city ward. Now tell me that the communities of interest, especially if you, is there a way of blowing it up to where we can see Ward 4 and the fingers of Ward 4 and Ward 1 intertwining? Because to me, communities of interest, how is it that, and I don't have a highlighter, but when you look down at, well, let me get my glasses on now so I can see. This Albuquerque Street, all the way to Union is Ward 1, but Tilden and Hendricks, which are, and Matthews and Deming, which are, and Deming actually gets split to where half the street, but that is actually a precinct split, so it's not any of our doing. How is someone that lives on Deming, on the north side of Deming, and someone that lives on the south side of Deming, how is it that they're not a community of interest, even though they're neighbors? But we split it, and I mean, and it is a precinct split. But tell me that is not a drastic change compared to what any of these specific. And I understand the shift of all 3 going up to Berendo is a big change, but 3 is the one that's going to be growing the most, I presume. And I know we are not making choices because of what's going to be happening. We have to take the snapshot of what we got from the 2020 census and try to make a plan out of it. But the 5 choices we've got, pretty much all of them are doable without doing as much changing as we did in 2010. So when we get slapped with community of interest and all that, what we changed in 2010 was way more drastic than what any of these things are proposing. I yield.
I have Councilor Stubbs. Councilor Stubbs, you have the floor.
That was fast, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just one comment, Councilor Foster. What I recall was that evening, as we were sitting there at a workshop where we were looking at these lines and moving a lot around, was the exact time we were notified or made aware of the fact that we had to have 2 majority-minority wards. And so that's what caused a lot of work that evening and took a lot of time and a lot of going back to looking at numbers. But like I say, we had been under the assumption, I believe, or our demographer at least at the time had, that we only needed the 1, and we were made aware that we needed 2, and I recall that very vividly because I made the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On that note, Mr. Patterson, are we under any kind of court obligation as far as ward complexion, shall we say?
I'd have to look at whether there's federal stuff, like the Voting Rights Act or anything that applies to this situation. As I understand all the proposals right now, most of them are majority-minority wards that are proposed right now, so not an issue that has come up so far.
Okay.
It would appear, Mr. Mayor, that I have doubled the number of majority-minority districts from what you had after you completed your 2011 work.
Okay. I don't have any other councilors. Mr. Adair, you did not address option E.
Can we put up option E?
Might want to, don't lose that one, keep it nearby, so to speak. But and then councilors, after he speaks on E, I would like to go to the public at that time and see if there's any public comments, and then we can come back for further discussion.
I believe the Plan E only moved precincts 17 and 18 Can we have a close-up of wards 2 and 3, I suppose? I believe the request was to move ward precincts 17 and 18. Let's see. In Ward 3 to Ward 1. Extend wards in a more north-south manner. One of the criticisms over the years has been north versus south in Roswell. And by combining north and south, makes the councilors represent both sections of town, both north and south, as opposed to dividing them into sections that are somehow perceived to be at odds with each other. And so that was the input that I received for Plan D or Plan E.
All right. I don't have any counselors on my screen at this time. Let me go ahead and go with the public comments. Oh, counselor. Oh, you did that when I wasn't looking. Shame on you. Okay, Counselor Moore, you have the floor.
Now, I guess because I'm new, I have, these numbers are really swimming in my head right about now. And I had a conversation with the mayor because I feel like we always say there's no north and there's no south, but that's not true. Everybody that I've lived here my whole life. I'm not saying it's not necessarily a bad thing. We all get to be proud of where we are. If we're on the east side, we all have something to be proud of. So I'm not necessarily just a proponent of making it north and south if you get fair treatment north and south. Because you already know no matter what, unless y'all change the Ward 5, I'll be on the south side no matter what. So there's only so much you can do trying to pull a ward all the way north and south just to have each ward covered in the north or the south. So that's not necessarily, I don't necessarily believe that's the real answer. Now, getting, I don't necessarily know if somebody, and I mean this in the most positive way, I don't want anybody to take this out of context. It would be hard for some of my friends that I know out on the base, for Miss Judy that lives up north and so to be represented, because she don't understand where I'm coming from. She doesn't understand, you know what I mean? It was hard for them to say that, I know y'all gonna take this wrong, that the prim prop, I don't mean, I love you to the utmost, that the prim proper white lady from the north side, elderly, beautiful white lady from the north side, can understand, or vote or understand what the younger Hispanics on this side might want to know. And I don't know what somebody was saying about the continuity not making a difference, but y'all don't live on that side, so y'all don't understand that part of it. That some voters really want to see themselves represented. And if Miss Judy goes to the base in her three-piece suit, she's not going to be received like me or Mr. or Juan or Mr. Sanchez that come, whatever. So I'm not in this, you guys keep saying it's not race and it's not this and it's not that, but you guys have to understand that y'all didn't run the race that I had to run. Going to some of those places that were ugly and being called a nigger and being the dogs and having guns pulled and all those things. Y'all didn't go through that. So y'all don't understand that. So you just think because I move a line over here, that makes the people respect and understand and do this, that, and the other. I am struggling with, I know the percentage, I know y'all gonna say we don't matter, the percentage of 1% or whatever it was, 1.7% African American, you're gonna say we don't matter. And it's just that I've had so many calls about if if you move out of this ward, then we're not going to be represented. If Miss So-and-so comes over here, then it's not going to get the represented. So much has happened because somebody in minority was here, and this was able to happen, and this, that, and the other. And I'm not saying these things for pity or anything. I just want us to understand as we begin to do this redistricting, we got to think of who's representing who. And I know Ms. Beth says it all the time, is I represent the whole city, and we do. I'm not respected by the whole city. I'm not respected by the whole city. I may represent the whole city when I make my votes and this, that, and the other, but I'm not respected by the whole city. I'm not. I'm not respected by everybody in every ward. So, and nobody is. So as we begin to make these decisions, we got to, we're not thinking about growth, we think about right now and what needs to happen. Now, I saw there's so many changes. Like I said, I wasn't around when the initial one happened, but I want us to think about the constituents of Roswell and not the constituents of Ward or what my agenda is. If I get more people in Ward 3, if I get more Caucasian in Ward 3, I'm more likely to win. Or this, that, and the other. That's not what I want to think about, because it's not just about that. It's about the city of Roswell and how we can best represent them. If I'm not here next year, I still want everybody to understand and know that we were here fighting for Roswell and not fighting for East Side, West Side, North Side. And it does not matter if just because you move my ward from north to south that I'm going to be respected anymore, or I'm going to be able to understand the constituents of that ward. So we have to take the time as councilmen to understand one another, and I don't think we do. I don't think, thanks, Mr. I don't think we take the time to understand anybody outside of our neighborhood. We don't take the time to understand anybody else, and I think that is a problem in this city, that we do not. That's why there's so much fighting and so much influx of drama, because we don't take the time to get to know each other or the people in the other districts. All we know what goes on is on my side of the street. And so as we begin to vote on this, I want us to begin to think about not just north and south side, like you said. And I understand, I really do understand what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, I really do. And I guess I've been here a couple of years longer than you, but it is not necessarily a bad thing that there's a split on the north side and the south. So that's not necessarily a bad thing if we begin to understand the nature of what goes on in the south. So I don't have to live on the north side to necessarily understand what goes on the north side or to be able to vote. You know what I mean? So I just begin, let's think about those things as we make these decisions. And I don't want, as with everything we do, a lot of things that we do is to become a big argument. I want, I like the numbers. I like the numbers. I'm a good thing. Thank you, Mr. Senator Adair. I'm kind of like them. A lot of choices sometimes make things a little more difficult. The more choices you give people, the more fighting there is. there is more room there is for discussion and argument and fighting. So I would have probably preferred a few less options, but I understand, trying to, to give people options. But sometimes it becomes a little more confusing when you have so many. I don't know if somebody asked you for that many options, but I just think it becomes confusing with so many options.
No, Madam Councilor, on that note, I had one city inform me, just give us 2 maps, otherwise they'll start arguing. One city actually told me that. So.
See, and sometimes these choices make things difficult, and there's 10 of us, so just think about how many choices. We got 5 choices, and there's 10 of us already, so you know how, see where we are? And there's 10 of us, 10 different votes, 10 different, opinions. And so if you were down to 2, 5 and 5, we'd be a little easier. We'd be a little closer to the mark. But I just, like I said, I just want us to begin to work together as a counselor. And the mayor might get mad at me for thinking, I think we need some race relation things, some things so we can understand each other, because I don't, I know you do it as an employee, and I know Mr. Ned hopefully does it with the city, to understand other cultures. And I think as a council, we ought to do something together so we can understand each other, instead of just come together at these meetings and hash things out. Because if we took the time to understand each other's culture and races, then we wouldn't be, I don't think it would be as difficult to hold a meeting and have issues. We wouldn't have as many issues if we took the time to understand each other. All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm
Okay. I have Councilor Best and Councilor Foster. Councilor Best, you have the floor.
So I'm kind of really curious on how many citizens in Roswell really see the ward boundaries. You know, of course, I don't even remember how many came to vote, but how many really see the ward boundaries? They'll see Goddard High, they'll see Roswell High, that's your north-south right there. But your boundaries, I don't think are with that. I agree wholeheartedly with you that when I walk down south during the election, I made sure that I dressed down, and that's wrong to say. But for them to open those doors to me, I had to dress down to get there. When I walked north, I dressed more up. She's right. We don't know each other's, way we live or whatever. We talk more now than we ever talked, and mine's mainly all questions, and she gives me answers unless she's correcting my English, which that's what an English teacher does. But how many citizens really see the wards? They'll go to the box, they have this choice or this choice, they'll mark a choice, they'll go on, they come to city council, and they talk here. Of course, I personally would like to ask each one that talks and complains if they voted. That's me, but I know I can't do that. So I think the closer we stay to what we have now, I agree that our neighborhoods are where we are, but I work for the whole city. I have no questions. When I sit down at public safety, we talk about everything in the city. We don't talk just about Ward 3. We don't talk just about Ward 5 because she's in my group. So I'm having a real problem with 5 and the way it was presented, but I'll sit back.
I have Counselor Foster, and that exhausts my list.
Thank you, Mayor. And I have a couple of things. I think that one of the things that I like about our council is we are very diverse. Of the 10 people we have up here, we have most, and we have, I always forget the numbers because I don't really pay attention to the numbers, but we have Hispanics, Anglos, Hebrews, Native Americans. I mean, if you want to, but that doesn't matter to me because I don't look at that and I don't look at that when I'm talking to people. I also, going back to, I work for the whole city. I mean, I find myself working in Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 4 all the time. It doesn't matter. When someone calls me, you try to help their situation. When we go back and when we're looking at this ward or the Plan E, looking at 3, and like we said so many times, we have to go with our snapshot. We don't have to go with the plans, but we all know that a major home development is going in 13 right there. We also know that in 21, that I really think got undercounted, we have a huge apartment complex, and we have another apartment complex that's coming in. And so when you look at it and see that this is at -3%, we know there's going to be growth there, and it'll bump up. But that would help me make my decision towards a map or not. It doesn't mean that's what we have to decide with. But I do want to say that, Ms. Moore, I know that African Americans represent 1.7%. I'm glad that you represent 10% of our council, and you do count. And every single person counts, and that's what I want the feeling in Roswell for every citizen to feel like they count. I don't think they look at wards, but that's our job to make sure that we keep it balanced, and that's why these proposals, 5 proposals, all meet and beat, I think, what we have now. So that's the problem, and I was in on creating what we have now. So I yield.
All right, I don't have anyone else on my list at this point. I'd like to go ahead and see if we have any public comment. And so for that, if counselors, I would like to see anyone in the audience here wishing to speak. Go ahead, sir, come on up, state your name, state your address, and let's do this in 3 minutes.
Pretty hard in 3 minutes.
Go ahead.
This is a workshop, so I was hoping to have a little bit more time.
Okay, let's see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. And I might not even go past the 3 minutes because
I'm sorry?
I might not even go past the 3 minutes because
Okay.
there's a lot of conversation that's gone on and some really good questions
Okay.
by the
Let's
counselors.
go ahead and start off, and we'll see
Okay.
where we can get to, okay?
Mayor, councilors, Senator Adair. My name is Frank Sanchez, 1611 South Cottonwood. I've been a plaintiff in 7 voting rights cases, all of them successful, or we prevailed in all of those voting right cases. I was one of several plaintiffs, which I think is still relevant today. I was one of the several plaintiffs in the mid-'80s that challenged the at-large election system. That's what we were on up until the mid-'80s, and under the Voting Rights Act. And I think that's why I'm bringing this up. A lot of other things have been brought up. What are fair redistricting principles? Voting Rights Act has to be included in that, especially Section 2. And especially since you resolved a lawsuit with us, or with the Hispanic community, or with Hispanic plaintiffs, that was under the Voting Rights Act, which created single-member districts for the city of Roswell. And I will say a little bit talking about diversity. The at-large election system really shut out the Hispanic community, shut out the minority community, because you could live in a ward, for example, live in Ward 5, but the whole city voted on it. So the candidates of choice from the Hispanic community could not be elected. And that's why the lawsuit was filed, and that's why we prevailed. I could go more on the history, but what we got out of that is we got single-member districts and we got fairly drawn districts. And I will say there's no guarantee just because you have minority districts that those districts will elect minorities. But I will say since that lawsuit, since we went to single-member districts, we have quadrupled the number of minorities sitting on the city council. In fact, right now we have 3 Hispanics, 1 African American. We have 4. That was more than we had up until that middle.
Actually, you have 5 Hispanic.
Well, 5 of them. That's news.
5 Hispanic and 4 women.
And that's great. And the point is up until the 80s, we had a total of 4. Basically 1 per decade, 1 Hispanic per decade up until the middle 80s. And I think that's still very, very relevant. And so one of the considerations on these plans is the Voting Rights Act. And under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, you cannot dilute the minority vote. And you cannot, and there's a couple of ways to dilute the minority vote, is to crack, which is to go to precincts or to wards or districts and split them in three ways that they end up diluting the minority vote. The other way is to pack voters. In other words, taking a whole lot of minorities, sticking them in one ward, and then weakening the possibility of drawing other districts. So that's another way that happens. So to not go on or belabor the point, because there's been so much conversation, and I do agree with some of the counselors, you need a real workshop. And 10 years ago, those were real workshops, because you sat around the tables, you talked to each other, the counselors went to the other counselors, what do you think about this? As far as I can see, that hasn't happened. So here are some of the red flags that I see for these redistricting plans. Until tonight, I didn't know this, which is a good thing, is that the current that all the current counselors are in that plan, and they're correct, or in their current wards, as I understand. But to me, Plan A packs the minority community in District 5. I think when you start approaching 80%, I think that's packing. And you could take some of the minority population and strengthen another minority ward. So I think it just weakens the other district. Plan D does the same. And to me, the plan that concerns me the most is the plan that was presented tonight, or is Plan E. To me, it's the most egregious. It does not meet the eye test. It looks like gerrymandering all the way at its core. And in my view, it does both. It packs and cracks, because you have a district that's packed in District 5, and then you dilute the vote of a traditional East Side ward. That ward goes from 67%, as I understand, if I have the numbers correct, from 67% to now 56%. That's, in my opinion, dilution. And also, you're taking out some key East Side precinct that's always been part of the community interest. I think you're taking out 41 or 42, which belongs on the East Side. You know, traditionally there's been two strong East Side precincts. Obviously the Hispanic population has grown, so now there are more potential for majority minority districts. At the end of the day, you know, and then I had a lot of questions. You asked a lot of those questions. One of the questions I had, did Senator Adair, did the mayor, did anybody consult with any individual counselors? That would be a question. Another question is, did Senator Adair or the mayor consult with any of the minority elected officials, the Hispanic elected officials? I think that's important. There was one other question I had. And to me, at the end of the day, the goal of redistricting is fairly drawn districts. And there's standard objective, or there's criteria that's standard objective. And the objective in the sense is that the redistricting principles are deviation, which you talked about, which is communities of interest, which you've sort of talked about, and contiguous districts, and most important in my eyes is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, especially because you settled the lawsuit with the plaintiffs around the Voting Rights Act, and that's how we got single-member districts, or districts by ward. I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ms. Call, what was the time on that?
7 minutes.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak on this? Let me go with Mr. Conley. Come on forward, state your name and address.
Larry Conley, 2815 in Cantle. You should all have that memorized by now.
We do.
And most of you know, I drive all over the city and have my eyes. I agree that I don't know Ward 5 that well, don't know Ward 4, don't know Ward 1. I live on the north side, so I happen to know north side better. Joe Neb has the forums different wards, which I enjoy. I watch all of them, I enjoy them. I think the city, to cover your position, Angela, the city, each ward should rent one of our buses and take concerned citizens like me and take us on a tour of your ward and stop at different places and explain, where the people of Ward 4 buy their groceries, things like that. That would be my suggestion. I think I would like to see the next workshop that we have the maps, but I also would like to have a map, separate map of each ward, and then, you know, the combined one. But I'd like to be able to say, okay, I can look at Ward 5, here's the boundaries. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. I forgot to mention for the record that Councilor Perry left at 5:45 p.m. off the GoToMeeting. All right, let's see where we're at. Oh, Councilor Moore.
For Mr. Larry, Mr. Conley, not a question. I just want to know, you know, how many people you think gonna get on that bus to go ride on the east side? I'm just saying. Okay, so you want me to get you on the bus, Mr. Conley? On the city bus, and take you, little Larry Conley, and a couple of other little people to ride around on the east side on the bus? Mm-mm. You ain't been around long enough.
What was that again?
All right, we're losing it here. We're losing it.
No, he was saying about, no, did you hear what his suggestion was? Did you hear what his suggestion was? Is to get some people from one of the other wards and take the bus and ride around to the other neighborhood. My point was how many would be comfortable doing that? And you might be, because you're cool, you laid back. But how many other people would be comfortable? I like the suggestion, but I just don't know how many people would be willing to, you know, to do it.
All right.
I don't know.
Okay, let's try and bring this to some conclusions here. What I'm hearing is a desire for another workshop. What I'm hearing is that Mr. Adair provide precinct-specific data regarding population numbers and ethnicity data by Friday, the 12th. And then the problems, I'm looking here at our calendar, we have counselors on the 15th. There is an Roswell Museum and Art Center rebranding at 5:30. We have a planning and zoning meeting at 6, which would be in, is it this room? Or is that?
See, that's on Tuesday.
Yes, that would
Jeff,
be the
can you
16th.
help me out here? Jeff and I, from IT, we're looking at the schedule earlier. IT is not going to be available on Tuesday, Wednesday.
Wednesday's not viable.
And then, no, we could make it work. Jeff won't be here. And then Thursday, the 18th, of course, is our council meeting. So just looking at IT schedule in order to try to make things work, another workshop, in my opinion, would be the best on Monday. The 15th.
Okay, that would be Monday the 15th. Mr. Adair, could you attend in the evening on Monday the 15th? You want to check your calendar? Because I think we're going to have you present. Mr. Nebb is shaking his head affirmatively to that comment.
It appears I can be, yes. And Mr. Mayor, I would like, could I address the council for a moment?
Sure. Can I come back to you here in a minute? I just want to nail down this stuff here. I got...
What time on the 15th?
Mr. Nebb, what do you think? We seem to have pretty good participation starting at 4, but I don't want to cramp anybody's style. Do you? And I can't take a vote. So I will say 4 o'clock. We can always start later. We can't start sooner. Is that a good way to put it? Mr. Patterson?
Let's set tentatively 4 o'clock to start.
Tentatively 4 o'clock, Monday the 15th. I will send an email to the city clerk in the morning. Will that give us enough time to post an agenda?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Mr. Adair. I wanted to get some of the details worked out. So, you go ahead and share your stuff. Wait, let me let Mr. Adair now go to, I have Best
Well,
and
it-
Foster.
it's- Yeah, but it's to the point of the special meeting.
Oh, hang on, regarding the special meeting.
Well, if we're having a workshop, can we schedule, and it seems like a consensus that we were wanting to narrow down our choices. Do we want to then have a meeting after the workshop so that we can narrow it down so that we don't have 6 plans, or if more are created from now till then, more at the city council meeting? That's what I'm,
All right, Mr. Patterson.
Well, I guess I would say, one, we're not making any decisions tonight about
Right,
what
we
we're
can't.
doing, including about scheduling meetings later. But to the point that the mayor can request a special meeting versus a workshop, I would suggest that we don't need to artificially divide them up. We can just have a meeting.
Just
We don't-
have the meeting.
Yeah, we don't need to have a workshop and then a meeting. That's just a meeting.
Okay, we'll just do a special city council meeting. All right. Now, the scope of that meeting could be to come up with a final plan.
Correct. Or, I think we could, again,
No, we do, we,
just spitballing here, we could leave it open so that the council has the opportunity to either make a motion to narrow it to 2 or 3, or to choose one, whatever the council wants to do at that point.
okay, so, we're working here a little bit. We could make that where we narrow it to one that becomes the subject of the public hearing and vote on the 18th.
Correct.
Okay, but it wouldn't be the final action, because that has to be done at a public hearing.
Correct. So you can choose a plan at a special meeting between now and the 18th, but it's got to be, the 18th is when we actually amend the ordinance that actually changes the boundaries.
Perfect, okay. I like that. Everybody understand that? Yeah, on that issue? On the
Yes.
scheduling issue?
Yes. If we have, if indeed we have a meeting versus a workshop, because generally on a meeting, we limit people to 3 minutes. Are
Yes.
we going to still have participation from the public and not limit it to 3 minutes?
Well, if we do a meeting, we'll stay with our rules, which is 3 minutes. Tonight, because of workshop, I
Well,
indulge
that's
Mr.
what-
Singh.
exactly my point.
Yeah, we.
That
we'll
if we
just-
have a meeting, we're going to limit people to 3 minutes
Right,
versus a workshop where people can really come and discuss and say what they have to say, which is the proper thing to do.
everyone is free to contact their counselors at any time. It doesn't have to be within the context of a formal meeting.
Well, Mr. Mayor, it's just like Mr. Sanchez just came and
Yes,
said his say to the whole council.
yes.
And when he comes to me and he talks to me, then what you're going to hear from me is an interpretation of what he has to say.
You can speak to the other counselors too.
Well, okay.
I'm trying
Mr.
to,
Mayor.
I'm trying
Oh, okay,
to manage
okay.
the meetings here, Counselor, and that's one of our challenges. Maybe we do split this into a workshop and then a meeting, with a workshop with extended comments by the public, and then a meeting to narrow the options.
It's up to you. That
Okay.
sounds like the same thing.
I
with your
will, I will
steps.
attempt, I think what I'm hearing is to try and accommodate everyone, we were gonna have to have a dichotomy here and split this into a workshop followed by a meeting to narrow options. So, that being said, before I go to Counselor Best, can I hear from Mr. Adair?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did learn some things from politics, and that is that you never, if somebody makes something that of a criticism or a smear that's incorrect, factually incorrect, and you don't refute it, you've accepted it. And some people say you've endorsed it. Mr. Sanchez came up here and said, quote, Plan A, red flags, packs the minority in District 5. As I shared with the council before, District 5 is today 77.28% Hispanic. Plan A, which made minor changes, is 78.2, exactly 0.4%. That, I can assure you, is not packing any district. It's, matter of fact, it's keeping it the same as it is today. So Mr. Sanchez effectively accuses the city of Roswell of packing itself, which doesn't make any sense. The reason I'm addressing this is people can watch this over closed circuit or whatever, and I don't want people left with false impressions about what I do or what's done in redistricting. He also said that Plan B does the same. Plan B is 73.6% Hispanic, about 4 points lower than what it is today. So that is also abjectly, completely, as we say in Spanish, rotundamente falso, completely false. Finally, he said Plan E is the most egregious. Plan E creates 4 majority Hispanic districts. That is double the number that Mr. Sanchez said he worked to create 10 years ago. Those are the facts. And I want the city council and anybody watching to understand that.
Mr.
Thank
Sanchez,
you.
we're not going to go back and forth. You had your say. Mr. Sanchez, take your seat. No, we're not going there. We're not doing that. We'll be here till midnight.
Mr. Mayor,
Hang on. I have Counselor Best first. Counselor Best, you have the floor.
I just wanted everybody to understand that Joe and Sharon have had no input on any of these maps. Sharon has been asked to do her clerkhood, move them forward. She's come in on Saturday to get these out because we've had extra asks for, and I want to thank you very much for coming in and doing extra work for us because you take very good care of us. And Joe, thank you for scooting around this and not getting in the fight. Thank you.
It's really not their place. It's the council's place. All right, Counselor Orpesa, you have the floor.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of my having the floor, I would like to ask Mr. Sanchez to come up and answer the statements by Mr. Adair.
All right. Mr. Sanchez, you've been called to the podium by Counselor Orpesa. I'm sorry, can you speak a little louder? We couldn't hear you.
A little misinterpretation of what I said. What I said is, packing, when you start to get to 80%, although it was 10 years ago, it was probably packing. But all I'm stating is that for me, that is close to packing, and that's a voting rights principle. The other thing is, I was talking specifically about District 1. I wasn't talking about that whole plan that surrounds that. District 1 goes all the way from the east side all the way to the north side. And it was at one time, or last time, it was 67%. Now it's 56%. To me, that's dilution of a traditional east side precinct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor Orpesa, you still have the floor.
I yield. Thank you.
All right. All right, counselors, here's where we're at. I will, unless somebody objects strenuously, ask, what was that?
I said, please be very cautious in your wording.
I was going to say, ask for a workshop on Monday the 15th to be followed with a special council meeting. I will go with 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. and I'll put that in an email to the clerk and to the city manager, with the objective that the special council meeting be one in which the council comes up with a preferred option to be acted upon at this council meeting on the 18th. So, councilors, we have 5 options. Look them over. I might even ask, dare I say this, for the sticker option. We put the 5 up there, and each counselor has 1 sticker, and you put it on the, and that's where we start. But we're not taking, we don't vote. We're not taking a vote here, but we've got options here, and if none of the options you feel are appropriate, then be prepared to come up with positive changes. That's what we need. To move forward, we need to identify a positive change. And I am not of the opinion that we should postpone this and leave the citizens unknowing what the awards are going to be. I think the point has been made. Individuals are going to be running for office on January 4th. They deserve to know as soon as possible what the boundaries of the 5 wards are, so that individuals can make decisions whether they will run or not run. So I'm of the opinion we should identify this. So, once again, Monday the 15th, we will have a workshop at 4 o'clock, a special council meeting at 6, and we will, at the council meeting, the objective will be to identify 1 option for action. Ms. Call, am I distressing you?
No.
I know. It is distressing. All right. I have the time now as 6:14. We are adjourned.